scenarios, and that's one of them is the accidental stuff, and it's not really disaster recovery. Disaster is when something catastrophic happens to one part of the farm or another, and that's kind of an occasional thing. And they're different. They're very different design points. I try to stay away from recommending any kind of backup solutions to customers beyond have one. It's always a good idea. And at an absolute minimum, make sure that their SQL databases are backed up, or the content database at the very, very, very minimum. Because you can basically reconstruct everything from there. That said, that can be a real painful process. The accidental deletion part that I was talking about, and I don't know how much hands-on if you've had any, Laura. I don't really work with this stuff much at all, but with the dual recycle bin and.
I don't anymore. I mean, I used to be a server admin, so I had to I was immersed in that stuff, and I had to help plan for everything and know what was being backed up when, and then be able to go get to it whenever someone called and needed, to get something that they had deleted or something from, a couple of months ago. I had to know like what sort of storage medium it was on, depending on how old it was, and how to go get that. So I agree with what you said about just telling people they need to have a backup strategy. And I mean, Todd usually talks to a lot of our customers about that type of thing. They'll ask him and he'll say, well, it depends, because it depends on what you want to back up, how granular it is, how much data, how much, how readily available you need it to be, and all kinds of factors as to what product you would buy or what method you would use. So there's so many different factors. So, but when I used to work at HealthSouth and I was a server admin, we had to have the whole disaster recovery plan, not just for SharePoint, but for all the servers. So we had to be able to have instructions together that you could step through and recover everything if, everything was gone.
Yeah.
So it was really hardcore, because we actually had to go to New Jersey and go to SunGuard and do the overnight thing with the disaster recovery. And you don't even get to go through your own disaster recovery document. You have to be able to hand it to someone that's a complete stranger to your technology, and they have to be able to follow the instructions to recover your stuff. So it's
that's a good drill.
It was pretty stringent.
Yeah.
So.
Well, that's good. I was going to throw in too. Another big factor in all this stuff is how long can you stand to be down, right? And how much data can you afford to lose, right?
Yes, and how much data do you have?
Right. Yes, exactly. Yeah, remember that server on stage at the SharePoint conference? How do you want to back? You want to back that one up?
So, yeah, my husband's a server admin too, and he just got back from one of those overnight, like week-long things. He had to go to Denver and do that. He's a Citrix admin, but same idea. He had to do that same kind of drill. It's not fun.
But if we come back, I guess, to the non-disaster side of it, I deleted something last week and I need it back. That story's gotten a lot better if you use the backup tools in SharePoint, which were there in 2007, but all you could restore to was at the site level. So basically, it was a complete restore. You'd bring it right back to where it was at that point in time, not just that document, but everything that goes with it. It's just like dealing with Exchange, right? If someone wants to get one mail message back and you're dealing with a store that everybody's got all kinds of stuff that's going to affect them. So inadvertently, I don't know how many times I did this with 2007, it's literally building up a new farm, taking the restore of that content database from that date to find that one thing, copying that off, and then moving it back up to the other farm. That's like a day long to do that. Yeah. What a pain. But there's good third-party tools that make that.
Yeah, and if you don't have third-party tools, a lot of the time you're going to rely on whatever the out of the box is, and you rely on scripts too.
Yep.
So we had a script that would do a I think it was a backup and restore just every night of. It would keep like 2 days worth. So you'd be able to have like an actual full copy of each site for 2 days from whatever the script. So we kind of had different levels, because beyond 2 days, then you had to just rely on the SQL backup and that type of thing.
Yep. Yeah, I get you.
So
Yeah, like I say, there's all kinds of different levels too with the databases. If you just get content database, well, you can build up a new form and attach that back in, but you're going to be installing all the solutions and all of the pieces and parts that were there, and your different zones and all. You're going to have to bake all that up. But if you can get a total, you've got everything totally backed up, and you got the right tool to do it, you can push a button and have your system right back up and running. That's the panacea. But there's always a trade-off between cost and time and all of that stuff.
how often do you think, well, I guess it would be per company or per user, but how often do you think one would have to go back and recover something? And I'm not talking about disaster, that high level, but just, partial recoveries, like something like what you just did, John. Hold on. Does that happen often? Because, I mean, say that it would take a day just to recover, one thing. It's kind of out there. Or how can you prepare for something like that?
Well, you charge somebody to recover their one document for a whole day's worth of services. They get pretty smart about backing it up after a little while after they do it a few times. So hopefully not too many times. This is again in the 2007 world. But with how long do you have to, or how often do you have to go back and do something like that? It really depends on the user base. Too often.
All right. Thanks a lot. I want to make sure that Chris is able to join the conversation now. He joined by phone. Chris, are you there?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you kind of low.
It's a little faint.
Okay. Any better?
There you go.
Yes.
Sorry.
Sorry about that, Chris. I'm not sure what was going on. I think Laura had some technical difficulties last week as well, so I might have to check into that. But I wanted to thank you for joining us today and let everybody know you were here. All right, so one thing that I was kind of confused about when I was looking at today's session and trying to learn a little bit more about backup and recovery, there was something that said that there's no recycle bin for sites. Or there is, but there's a web part that you can use to correct it. Now, I was pretty confused by this, and maybe Laura or one of you can help me. This statement, does this sound true or false? There is no recycle bin for sites.
They're adding it. Did they add it already? I know they just added it in Office 365.
SP1.
SP1, yeah.
SP1.
That rang a bell.
Yep. Haven't touched it yet myself, though. I don't even know where to look for it. But I know it's there.
Okay. What were people doing before this? Well, actually, since it's new now, so no one's probably still using it now. So what are people doing now to help recover sites?
Remember that scenario I was just talking about?
Okay. Wow. Laura, did you hear of any kind of web part that can help with this?
Help with what? Sorry.
I'm sorry?
I missed what? A web part to help with what?
In recovering sites. And let me see if I could bring up what I'm talking about. I saw this in the, let me move forward a little bit. Recycle bin, how you can configure a web part, I guess, to collect collect the information from a site. Does that sound familiar?
That doesn't make any sense to me.
It says a SharePoint object model allows developers to custom build backup solutions at the web delete event.
No idea.
Okay.
Sounds like developer stuff. I don't know.
You could do it, right? You could hang off the deleted event and take it and put it somewhere. Maybe someone's done that.
Yeah. Well, Quest had a little tool back in the day, back in 2007, that kind of did that. As soon as they hit delete for deleting the site, it didn't really delete it. It just took a copy, took the whole copy of it and saved it off somewhere for a certain amount of time, and that was their way of doing a recycle bin. So, yeah, same idea, I think.
Makes sense. And then they'd be the company to look to for it, or one of them.
Okay.
But if it's out of the box in 2010 now, then that kind of thing is not really needed.
Right. Well, there was a whole cottage industry around recycle bin function for 2003 way back then.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Because that wasn't there.
Well, that's good. I would love to, if you start playing around with that, please bring it back up and let me know how easy it is to incorporate in your everyday sites.
Sure.
All right. So moving on to what John was talking about a little bit earlier, which is catastrophic recovery. And I guess he went into it a little bit before, but if you want to give a quick overview of what actually symbolizes catastrophic recovery and some of the things that can kind of help you to be prepared for it.
Well, from where I'm standing, I guess catastrophic recovery would be something that was unplanned for, unanticipated, and something failed. Something that you used to be able to rely on, you can't anymore. And that could be anything from a server to disk to server room to a building, quite frankly. And you want to, it depends on, again, your tolerance and your tolerance for for being down and losing data and all of those things. How valuable is your data? How many nines do you need, right? 99.9 uptime.
Mm-hmm.
What's your service level agreement to your end users? And it boils down to crank those those nines up. You're going to be spending a lot of money and a lot of time on from a catastrophic recovery standpoint. Not to mention just a standard maintenance downtime, but that's another thing. So you want to be able to have things like failover, and then there's multiple components to it, right? So if you need high availability, and that's if something totally goes catastrophically wrong with a server, well, if you've got a multi-server farm and a load balancer, although your performance goes down, you can automatically flip over to that with SharePoint. If you're using SQL, that story gets a little bit muddier, but it's possible to do through clustering and things like that. So that's a question: where is your failure? You could have a network failure between your SharePoint box and your SQL box. It's catastrophic. That's for a period of time, and then that's not going to lose you any data. That's losing availability. And then from a data standpoint, yeah, you lose disks, you lose databases. You want to make sure you got that stuff offline. So your worst case is your SQL server goes south on you, or your SQL servers go south on you for whatever reason, and you want to make sure you can go back somewhere from where it's backed up and restore it. Todd had a great story. You mentioned Todd earlier. He had just a fantastic story about that, about the SAN getting overwritten with blank.
Todd's got a lot of great stories when it comes to that stuff, because he's the emergency guy that people call, right, for that.
Yeah. But basically they had, in their case, they had a whole SharePoint farm to set up with VMs, and their storage provider was setting up a new SAN, and they wound up replicating a blank SAN over top of the production SAN, and they lost absolutely everything. They had to go back to tapes and the content databases and rebuild the farms and the solutions and all that stuff. But it is possible to do. It just takes a little while, and it probably cost them $1 or $2.
Yeah, $1 or $2.
Wow. All right. Well, thank you so much for that overview. And it's funny because you guys, I believe. Oh, I guess this is not the question that I really wanted to bring up next. What I wanted to talk about was something that you guys mentioned a little bit earlier about third-party recovery tools and backup, and just kind of figure out what you've used in the past and what you would recommend for those who are beginning to set up their strategy as the best third-party tool.
I go back to what I was saying. I don't really have an opinion on it. I know that the Microsoft has the Data Protection Manager. That's the only one I really have any exposure to personally, and I know it can do things like continuous level backing up, so you'll never lose. I think the highest resolution you can get is 15 minutes. So if you had a catastrophic failure, you'd always be able to restore up to within the last 15 minutes of data. And do item level restores the same way. But I know Quest has products out there. The usual suspects in the backup arena have products out there that plug into SharePoint, but I don't have any recommendations whatsoever.
Okay. Well, Laura, Chris?
When you make a backup recommendation, you tend to get the phone call when things go south, and I really don't want those phone calls.
Yeah, I mean, there are some big players like Quest and AvePoint, and they have the higher end. I have zero experience with either of those, with any of those products, though. The only experience I have personally is with just writing scripts and like STS-ADM commands way back in the day to do the backups automatically at night, and just the out-of-the-box tools. So I can't recommend anything that I've never used, you know.
No, definitely.
I would say that's still a very good approach.
I'm glad I'm not the one that has to do that stuff, too. So.
Right,
I used to do a lot of Novell NetWare back in the day, and I was responsible for backups and restores. And when things went south, you had to bring it back overnight, and I had enough of those late-night phone calls, thanks.
You mentioned the data protection manager, right, John?
Mm-hmm.
Have you used that? Yeah.
Yeah, why would I use it? Well, one, I'm a Microsoft business partner, and I get it for free, so that doesn't hurt. That's a biggie. I tend to, if Microsoft's got a product and it's competent in the space, I tend to go with it from an integration standpoint. I like the way they tie together, and they tend to obviously be aware of each other's products, although that's not as true as often as you might think. It also ties into their system center. Wow, I'm getting off my topic into infrastructure, but the system center, control center, this is actually a component of that, and you can use it to not only administer your SharePoint form, but to do all the backups. So, from a UI standpoint or from an easy use thing, manageability, it's probably one of the better products to use. But from a functional standpoint, how that stacks up against some of the app points and quests and stuff like that, I really don't know.
Okay. And please, audience, if you have some some experience with it, please step up and share with us. We would love to hear your stories as well. All right, so we keep moving. This was very interesting when I was looking for it, because I have no kind of experience around on this, so everything for me is new. And every time when I talk to you guys and I mention, okay, so now we're talking about this level of recovery, John always mentions the next level that I have, so it's high availability. And I think that for me, just to talk about high availability, what exactly does that even mean? And when I looked up availability, it means that you can access your files and your information even when there's a shutdown. Is that correct?
You could look at it that way. High availability is what the guys who do Office 365 worry about on a daily basis. They need to make sure it's there. And it really, from an end user standpoint, I love that, because from an end user standpoint, you don't care. I don't care what server is on what. I don't care what's doing this. I just care that I can go to this address. I'm going to get what I need, and it's going to be relatively fast. And that's kind of high availability in a nutshell. Do whatever it takes to make sure it never goes down. That's the 99.9% uptime, or 99.99. And there's stats on how many seconds a year of downtime that means when you get into like 5 nines. I think it's like 30 seconds.
Wow.
But in that kind
That's
of
crazy.
Time, yeah. And there's people asking for it, but there's a cost associated with doing that, right? It's okay. So the increase in availability basically means you're going to have to increase your redundancy. So you're going to have load balancers and multiple server farms and multiple SQL clusters and multiple LAN links between all of those things. Making sure you've got a generator outside in case the local power goes out if you're hosting. All of those things, this is the stuff that hosters either worry about or should be worrying about in any event. And that because every second of downtime is a bad experience for the end user. And that's the other side of hosting a solution is from a business standpoint, it's relatively easy to switch providers. Right, I'm using this service from this guy one time, and it starts to degrade. I might take my business away and take my content and put it somewhere else with someone else. Depends on what the service is, but
that's generally more true than if you have an investment in on-premises hardware.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, I have this later on in the conversation, but when you're talking about cost, you know, that's, I guess it's the different approaches that you take, and one would be a cold approach or a warm or a hot approach. Does that
Sure.
come from? Yeah.
You know, again, the cheapest approach is to get a decent backup of your SQL database and do it manually. So you do it, you know, every day. Hopefully, somebody remembers to do it. You know, then up it and make this scheduled, and you store your different backups at different days. Like Lori was talking about with a you get a rotation, so you do a daily backup and you keep, you know, say the last 5 or 7 days of daily backups, and every week you take that backup and you store it somewhere, and then you overwrite the rest of the tapes. So you keep like 5, I'm saying tapes, that shows you how old. But you get a series of tapes, you know, and they go off to the safety deposit box, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So you can roll back to a snapshot in time of decreasing resolution as time goes back. The question is, okay, so something happens now. How quickly can we get back up on our feet? Well, that's going to be a bit of a function of, you know, what happened. So we lost all our hardware. How quickly can we get new hardware in place? Right? That's not a function of the data. Maybe I have to have hot standby hardware that we don't even have up and running that I can swap in. Well, you know, that's going to be expensive to maintain. You can see where I'm going. It's you got to think about what you're trying to protect against, who your audience is, how much downtime can they afford, and that's versus how much effort is it going to take for you to bring things back up and running. I guess I started off on a thread where, you know, I'm talking about doing straight up SQL backups. They take a long time to restore. Well, okay, let's make sure we have the whole farm backed up. Well, that's going to be a little quicker when it comes to restore time. You get into these data protection managers and other products, which are literally streaming work as you're doing it to nearline storage, which is hard drive, and then that's taken and put on, you know, tape drives and offline storage, so that when something happens, you know, if it's possible, if you have the hardware to do it, you could just point the backup toward the new environment and say go and have it come up and running. You're only down potentially a few minutes in some cases. That's just a lot more expensive.
Yeah, that's what I was learning about as well, like the amount of expense that it takes just to cover your back.
Mm-hmm.
This is a crazy true false question, because I've already heard clustering being mentioned a couple of times today, but I have also saw this: clustering is obsolete. And I can give you a, yeah?
No, I don't know. Why would they say that?
Yes,
What's the new thing besides clustering? I don't understand.
So I think they're talking about Denali and SQL 2012.
Oh, cool.
There's a new feature. Yeah, but careful. There's a new feature called Always On, right? And it's cool. And I actually gave a presentation at a SharePoint Saturday here in Toronto on the weekend on 2012, and it's funny because the SQL guys always bash how SharePoint stores its data in that one big table and that one content database, et cetera, and how, you know, we can do it so much better, blah 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 blah. Our availability story is way better than SQL's availability story. It has been for a long time. I mean, we think nothing of adding a SharePoint server to the farm, bang bang, throw a load balancer on the front, and our availability story goes up. They can't do that. They can only scale up, and they get these failures, and they've got 3 different availability stories, which is log shipping, mirroring, and clustering. So here's back to your slide. Clustering is obsolete. I think they just renamed it.
Okay.
What they have done is make that easier. I mean, the whole clustering is when you, from a SQL standpoint, is when you have 2 servers pointing at the same data at the back end. Okay.
Okay.
Mirroring is when you've got 2 sets of servers and 2 sets of disks, essentially, and then you're constantly taking content from the one disk and sending it over to the other one. But the second one's not live, right? It's just there, ready to be failed over to, and that's a manual process when the main one fails. And that's why when you set up a SharePoint farm, whenever you're setting up a database, it's always asking you have an option to have a secondary SQL server. That's basically to support that. So SharePoint can know if it stops getting a response from the first one, it can start talking to the second one. With always on, it's essentially as though the SQL guys are putting a load balancer up front, and they'll do the failover in the back end, but it makes it a lot more seamless for people who are using it. That's what kind of always on's all about. But behind the scenes, I think they're basically using clustering and mirroring, et cetera, et cetera. So I hesitate to say it's obsolete, but it's also not out yet, by the way. But that, again, that demo at the SharePoint conference, that's exactly what they were demonstrating when they had the buddy come out and unplug the one SQL server set. Availability groups, I see it up on the slide. Yeah, that's an always-on concept. They call them availability groups. So you can say, here's the database on this server, and it's over here, and it's over here, and that's where you can go and look for your databases. So when you come to basically a virtual SQL name, it'll load the data from any one of those, or actually one of those, but it knows how to fail over to the other ones.
Okay. Yeah, so I guess it's not obsolete. It's just got a new name.
Yeah, I'm not an authority on this stuff. This is just a bit of a passing knowledge, so don't take that as 100%. But I believe that's what's going on. They've improved the manageability story greatly.
I need to go back and look at all those Denali presentations from SPC that I didn't get a chance to go to. So it sounds pretty cool.
There's some cool stuff. I like obviously the BI stuff a lot more, but you go to those and you wind up getting exposed to the availability stuff. There's some good performance stuff in there too.
And we do have a question. And Laura, seriously,
Mm-hmm.
I would love to bring that up, like maybe on a future shop talk. So I guess let me know when you go back and look at what's going on with Denali.
Oh, yeah, I have another book chapter to write for another book now, and yeah, I'm never going to ever have any spare time.
We do have a question from Tune 6, and he's asking, does Always On work with live migration?
I don't know what live migration is.
I don't either.
I'm going to mute you, Tune. Maybe you can share your question. Tune?
Yes. System Center? Yeah. Mm-hmm. You got me. I know how to spell System Center, and actually I would disagree with how that's spelled, but anyway. Yeah, I know what it contains, but I really don't have any kind of knowledge about how it works, so I don't know what live migration is all about.
Live migration is is based on clustering, and it uses System Center Virtual Manager, and so if one virtual machine goes down on a physical server A, you can immediately switch over, migrate to a virtual machine on a server, a physical server B, because with a SAN, storage attached network, disks between the two servers. So
yeah, I know what you're talking about. So that's kind of at a lower level than we're talking about. So I don't see any reason why it wouldn't work with it, but I don't think it would be. It would matter to it. You wouldn't need it as much, I suppose, if you've got that kind of a backend. I do know that Always On has got a whole bunch of plugins for System Center. I do know that.
Mm-hmm.
All right, thank you for your question, Tune. I believe that's all the questions I had around, because we already talked about choosing a cold and warm and hot recovery strategy. So those are the questions that I had for today. I would like to turn it to the group or and even to the attendees if there's anything that you'd like to speak about or any questions that you have before we move on. All right. So I guess that's all I have for today. We kind of got through this pretty quickly, and wanted to also let you know that last week's SharePoint ShopTalk is on YouTube. You can go to our Facebook page and you can watch the whole recording. And it was pretty nice. We had we had our panelists and attendees look at different public-facing sites and how they can be improved. And one of our attendees actually showed her own site and shared it with the group, so that was really nice. So if you ever have some time and you want to check and see what people are doing, you can check out that recording. And I'm not going to hold you unless there's someone that's going to stop me. I'm going to...
I do have a question.
Oh, okay. There you go.
Okay.
Hi.
I'm sorry, I joined it a bit late. I'm still exploring a lot. You know, I've been learning a lot about SharePoint Online, SharePoint Server, and what I see happen is bigger companies are starting to move their website, their public website, to SharePoint Server, and then at the same time they have the SharePoint portal. So I was wondering, is it easy for to move or to publish a list or publish data from the portal to the SharePoint public site, which is on the same SharePoint server? I'm sorry. Because I can see marketing people say, okay, let's start a marketing campaign, and then let's get the material ready, and they work, revise the material. Finally, they have a final copy of the marketing program, and they say, let's now publish it on the public website. Is that easy to do, or is it quite an effort? It does, you know, the program. Okay, go ahead.
Andrew Connell has written something about that. I'm looking for it. So, yeah, I'll have to look for that because he has he's got a lot of experience with that. I think he wrote a blog post about it.
Okay.
Oh.
Okay. Okay, good. If you have my email, or I don't know, I'll give you my email.
I don't know if I'm going to find it, but I can look. I swear I thought he wrote something, so I don't know. I can. Where should I put it, Jamise, if I find it?
The site, I would say share it. You can either send it to me or you can share it on Facebook. And because Toon, you're on Facebook, right? You're on our Facebook page.
On Facebook.
Okay. Yeah, that might be the easiest because you can just share the link directly like that.
You don't have a forum with SharePoint ShopTalk? Is there no forum?
Yes.
On LinkedIn, there kind of is, yeah.
Yeah. I would use the forum, you know, so other people can take advantage of it, and then your SharePoint ShopTalk site gets more visits. That's what I would recommend. It's up to you.
Yeah, that's good too. I really like the LinkedIn because when there's communication on there, it tends to go for a lot longer than when there are no questions being posted there. So you're right. So that would be a good place to put it, Laura. I can always copy it into Facebook after you do that.
Basically, all he says is you use anonymous for your public-facing www.company.com with FBA, and users have no edit rights. We're private, and then your private, intranet, your company.com is Windows auth only for domain accounts to edit content. Same server to web app. That's what
you can also use to get content. If you're authoring the web content inside, you want to push it out to the outside, you can use the content deployment tool. It's in Central Admin. It works now.
Okay. Okay. The other thing that I really start to realize is where we have a lot of web-enabled applications. We had first the client-server applications. Now we have the web-enabled applications, which is a big step forward. And now what I realize is customers are looking to make sure that the web-enabled application runs on SharePoint. And I can see the benefit of that, because then when the web-enabled application runs on SharePoint, you can also access documents, libraries that are in your portal of the SharePoint. Of course, you have to get the permission. But now we have one platform that hosts your web-enabled application, which could be a critical business application, like an ERP package or a project management package. And at the same time, you can access your documents, libraries, whatever lists you have on your SharePoint portal. So my question is, for the web-enabled applications that are available there but don't run on SharePoint yet, is it difficult to port them to SharePoint Server?
Well, they kind of all do, if you want to look at it one way. I mean, iframe, right?
Right. Okay.
And so beyond that, it's a question of how do you want it integrated, and that's a how far is up question.
Mm-hmm. I guess it must be not that difficult, because if it is developed in ASP.NET,
it is in ASP.NET, yeah.
So it should be able to run pretty easily on a SharePoint environment, right?
Yep.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Do you see the same trend happening, John? I think it's John White, right?
Mm-hmm. The same trend. People moving to SharePoint, sure. I'm not sure what you mean by trend, but those who have SharePoint would tend to want to you'd want to optimize your usage of it. So where possible, if you've got a point of integration, then you want to take advantage of it.
Right.
And, one approach to, I guess it gets back to, I throw out iframe, and it's a little bit glib, but it does work. But if you've got authentication, you've got users getting into SharePoint and entering their credentials to get into SharePoint, and then they hit a page and it opens up something, and bang, they get prompted to log in again, or there's a different mechanism. So the first thing you'd want to do is integrate your authentication schemes.
Right.
And then there's, how does the data come together? Maybe you want to crawl the data from that back-end system so that it appears in a SharePoint search and have that presented in a cohesive way. So it really depends on the requirements as to how much effort you want to spend on doing it. But yeah, in terms of new developments and things like that, you want to have some kind of a SharePoint tie-in. One way is, take your ASPX pages and get them into basically get them into a solution that deploys out to the layouts folder in SharePoint, and that gets to be more of a first-class citizen, or build a web part around that stuff, something like that.
Mm-hmm. 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 Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. Because SharePoint is very, very important in a lot of companies now. All corporations, they use SharePoint. So, if everything is integrated, it's so much easier to get to be more efficient. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. Also, by the way, James,
Yes?
you are the only event that enables dialogues. I've gone through so many SharePoint presentations, webinars. Most of the time it's a monologue. It's just, and I'm tired of these monologues now. I'm just too much. It's one way. And people who have some serious experience with SharePoint cannot express their issues or the real experiences and the issues they have with that. And I think you are unique. You're really unique.
Well, have you been to Todd Clint's SharePoint Admin Netcast on Monday nights?
Oops, that's new to me.
No. So toddclint.com, TODDKLINDT, toddclint.com, and he every Monday night he does a live netcast, and his face is on the screen with him talking and doing his netcast, but everybody's chatting and asking questions and stuff the whole time, and so everybody's, and he's kind of live answering the questions and talking out loud, but everybody else is typing, but it's pretty interactive.